Hello and welcome to the Sun Today for the 28th of April 2011. I'm Alex Young of NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, sitting in for Dr. Keith Strong. The current solar activity has still remained relatively low, though we have had a few C-class flares today. Earlier today we had a C1, and then towards the middle of the day we had a C2 and then another C1 flare. But this is really not the most interesting part of the activity today, as I'll show you shortly. Looking at the magnetic field in the continuum, we can see that not a whole lot has changed, except the region that produced the flare yesterday now has been given a number, 1201. 1195 has decayed slightly, but 1199 still seems to be interesting, and we're keeping our eyes out on it. The rest of the regions have stayed relatively the same. If we move on and look at the Solar Dynamics Observatory AIA instrument, the most interesting images today are from the 3 or 4 angstrom. This is giving us the relatively cool 60,000 Kelvin temperature material from the sun. And what we can see is several eruptions, one in the northwest, it's on the back side of the limb, very, very quick, very fast eruption. There's one in the middle north from a filament, and then there's a couple of prominences on the east-north limb. We'll show you in a second the results of one of these eruptions, which gave us a very nice CME. Moving on to the SOHO spacecraft, we first look at the C2 coronagraph. And you can see in the northwest, towards the beginning of the video, there's a very nice, well-defined CME eruption. It has a front of material, and then you can see a bright core, which is the filament material that's lifting off from the sun. If we move on and look at the C3, we can see farther out, but see the same eruption as it moves away. There's still several smaller ones, but really the most interesting one is the one in the northwest. Moving on to look at the entire corona with stereo SDO, we can see that there's not really any new activity that's coming around rotating onto the visible disk, so it'll still be several days before we see any of the active regions come around and come into visible view. Auroral activity has remained relatively low. The KP index is still low, around 1, giving us quiet geomagnetic activity. We still have a coronal hole which is producing high-speed solar wind, and NOAA is predicting that we'll see the effects of this over the weekend in the form of Aurora. So those of you at high latitudes, keep your eyes out on Saturday and Sunday for the possibility of Aurora. The current conditions, the sunspot number is 39. X-ray background is staying steady at about B3. The solar radio flux is down to 108 solar flux units. Solar wind speed is down slightly to 354 kilometers per second, and the KP index is quiet between 0 and 1. Currently, we expect more C-class flares, very low probability of M and X-class flares, and there's still a good chance of more CMEs. The current geomagnetic storm level is very low. However, as I mentioned, because of the high-speed solar wind coming from the coronal hole, we expect that this will increase some over the weekend with the possibility of Aurora. For more information, please fan us at www.facebook.com/thesuntoday and visit our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/thesuntoday. Thank you, and we'll see you again tomorrow.